John Henderson stands at the lathe outside his workshop, pumping the flat pedal which pulls the twine that tugs rhythmically at the spruce pole arching over his head. He focuses all his attention on the dowel, held in its cradle directly in front of him, watching it accelerate first one way, then the other, alternating between using the gouge and the chisel to release the form from within the wood. A simple chair leg, one of 4, identical to its 3 brothers. The noise of the gathering crowd at the village green is building, but John is too busy to pay much heed to these things. He has an important job to do, a proper commission from the clergyman.
"You're not coming, John?"
says Robbie Forbes, as he stumbles hurriedly past the lathe, ale splashing from the tankard in his hand. John looks up, but doesn't make any comment. John is a big man, perhaps the biggest in the village. If he doesn't want to share the time of day with his neighbours or take part in the village proceedings, he doesn't, and no one ever tells him different. Everyone else in the village is at the green, and the distant voice of the minister can be heard delivering whatever wisdom he sees fit to impart in his eternal, droning monotone. Young Mary Stuart has been found guilty of consorting with the devil and is to meet her end this afternoon. There was clear evidence of sorcery and magic about the girl, having been spied in the North Woods conversing with spirits, whispering incantations and collecting all kinds of weird botanical agents for ungodly and unnatural purposes. The witness to these crimes was none other than John Henderson, who had no option but to relate all he had seen to the clergyman just a few days hence. Having a witch within the village is no good for anyone, risking spoiled crops, disease, nightmarish visions, and God only knows what else. There is a sudden cheer from the crowd. John ignores the sounds and carries on with his work, pumping the footboard up and down. The North Woods had indeed been the scene of an unspeakable act, but not as John Henderson had described it. For it was there that he had lured one of the village children, little Matthew Byrne, under the pretext of hunting for rabbits, only to grab him most violently and perform dreadful things under the devilish spell of his darkest passions. Poor Mary Stuart, collecting wild flowers, had stumbled onto the scene, instantly taking in its full meaning before running back to her home as fast as she could. Once accused, Mary related her alternate version of the woodland encounter, but by then, her testimony sounded sour, like someone gasping for air as they drowned, and petrified little Matthew Byrne was mute on the subject, no doubt fearful for his own mortality. And so it was agreed that Mary Stuart's short life of 16 years should be ended, and may God have mercy on her soul. As the fire begins to crack and pop and the smoke rises over the rooftops, John resumes his work with renewed vigour, the rhythmic scraping of the chisel helping to drown out the sound of the blaze. But he cannot ignore the piercing, dreadful song of the girl's scream as she is cleansed from this world. A sound so high in its pitch and so disquietingly inhuman that it beggars belief. Perhaps she truly is an agent of the supernatural after all. The noises of the crowd turn from accusation to celebration, to pity, to fear, before dwindling to silence. Only the scream now, travelling through the late summer air and gently brushing up against the blade of the chisel, carving a microscopic record of Mary's last moments into the tiny groove-like indentations in the wood. And then, the palpable relief that there is only the sound of the burning fire. A soul departed. Slowly, John Henderson brings the lathe to a standstill, beads of sweat on his brow. He He stares at the chair leg before him for a long time until the villagers begin to disperse from the green, satisfied that justice has been served in the eyes of the Lord, and arguably more God-fearing than they had been upon waking that morning. The witch would have no funeral and no grave, and let that be a lesson to us all. Once assembled, the set of 2 chairs are clad in intricate leatherwork by one Roger Partridge, a travelling artisan, eccentric in nature, and rumoured to secretly hold pagan beliefs. Each chair features an identical design, the round face of a bearded man, not unlike a sun god or green man. John Henderson is apprehensive that the clergyman would have some misgivings about the artistry, but the minister is delighted.
A fine and accurate countenance of the Lord himself, John.
Once installed on either side of the humble altar in St. Michael's Kirk, they appear like royal thrones to the village folk, a theatrical flourish that seems to elevate the small church to the status of a cathedral. John Henderson attends the Sunday services when the inclination takes him, and he admires his handiwork, although there is always the grim feeling that the chair on the left is somehow imbued faintly with the spirit of the young witch. As an older man, he meets his end one day, aptly, whilst walking in the North Woods collecting timber. He trips over a root and cracks his skull open on a rock like an egg. At least, that's what most people believe when his body is found some days later. Only young Matthew Byrne knows better, now a man himself, shy and quiet in nature, but powerfully built. And when John Henderson makes his final journey to the afterlife, and the clergyman talks at length about his good standing as a vital, albeit solitary member of their small community, Matthew can swear that the leather face on the kirk's western altar chair takes on an unusual expression as a cloud flits across the morning sun, an expression of grim satisfaction mixed with subtle fury. The seasons come and go. John Henderson's lathe and tools have long been taken to pieces and given to the smith, who melts the various parts down to create pokers, pots, kettles. The chisel used to create the chairs lies in the corner of the smith's forge, until there is a request from the clergyman to create a wrought iron gate for the church. The metal blade is smelted down and mixed with a multitude of other scrap to form the basis of the gate. A row of iron railings is established around the full perimeter of the church grounds to segregate the holy land from the common. The sun arcs through the sky, and the world of mankind changes at an ever-increasing pace. Harvests are collected, babies are born, saints and sinners go about their business, and, all the time, the 2 altar chairs with their stoic faces are present at every sermon, christening and funeral. One day, a visiting cleric sits on the right-hand chair, and it collapses instantly under the bulk of his frame. It is pronounced beyond repair due to an infestation of woodworm, leaving its twin alone in the world. The surviving chair now looks out of place in the kirk, creating an unsettling, sinister asymmetry, and so it is placed in one of the private rooms behind the altar. Over the years, it bears silent witness to many acts of intimidation, humiliation and depravity, carried out in secret against the innocents of the parish, and always with the excuse that the Lord's will is being executed in whatever way the minister sees fit. More generations come and go, and although the world becomes unrecognisably faster and noisier outside the railings of St. Michael's, the dusty atmosphere of incantations changes little within the hallowed walls of the kirk. Some workmen in overalls arrive at the church and work solidly for 2 days, removing the wrought iron gates. smoking cigarettes and making crude jokes under their breaths about the clergyman and the cloud of rumours that surround him. The iron is noisily stacked on the back of a flatbed lorry and driven off to a factory where the material is yet again smelted down in an industrial furnace. The molten metal is hammered into sheets to create the cylindrical casings of incendiary shells. When finished, the shells are stacked in their batteries, shining expectantly in the gloom. Some weeks later, a cluster of shells is carefully loaded into a bomber, whose propellers noisily carry it into the twilight air above the hedgerows, making its way southeast to suck the very life from a city through the clinical application of chemical and physical science. One of its young and inexperienced crewmen makes the fatal error of accidentally releasing part of the deadly payload too early. The minister of St. Michael's is inserting the next day's set of hymn numbers into their ornate display, aware of the sound of the bomber flying overhead, its engine drone identifying it as friend rather than foe. So, when the whistle of the falling shell becomes unmistakably apparent, the clergyman looks up in disbelief for a moment before gathering up his vestments in panic and stumbling hurriedly along the candlelit aisle towards the small room that leads to the church cellar. When he reaches the door, he pushes with all his might against it, but it does not budge an inch. Unseen on the other side, a chair has somehow fallen back against the door's handle, jamming it shut. The shriek of the falling shell grows to an unholy crescendo, culminating in a blinding flash and a peal of thunder being unleashed from the very gates of hell. The fire brigade, ARP wardens and local volunteers fight to bring the conflagration under control. But by morning, it's clear the kirk is a complete ruin, with the exception of a few artifacts that have been curiously spared, including an unusual leather-bound chair that had fallen through a trapdoor into the safety of the cellar. The local constabulary are called to investigate the fact that the basement contained a safe that has unexpectedly opened. A curious effect of the blast, perhaps. A safe holding a large number of distressingly candid photographic plates and even artifacts that are suspected to be tools of the occult. To avoid any scandal, the contents of the underground safe are burned, and no more is ever said on the matter. The charred remains of the clergyman are found in two pieces at opposite ends of the ruined building, his blackened head twisted upwards into a silent and eternal rictus. When the war ends, the church sells the land to a local businessman, and a small petrol station and garage are built on the formerly consecrated site. The altar chair ends up in the hands of a local school teacher by the name of Byrne. He donates the chair to a young war widow who has relocated to the area from the capital after purchasing a pleasant tumble-down cottage on the edge of the village green. It is a happy, sunny home, filled with the laughter of two young children and the bark of a terrier. The chair sits in a corner of the stone-flagged kitchen, a silent observer of the lively comings and goings of the family. Twice a year, in spring and autumn, the late evening sunlight falls through the kitchen windows directly onto the image of the bearded man, fashioned into the leather. In the yellow light, with motes of dust and pollen swirling in the air, it sometimes looks as if the face is smiling. A beatific, serene smile earned through the wisdom and contentment of resolution. Then, as the sun sets, the face slowly withdraws into darkness and into the shadows of a peaceful, dreamless sleep.